Welcome to Promote, Profit, Publish. I'm your host, Juliet Clark. And today we have a guest who is one of my authors who has released a fiction novel that is very relevant in today's time. Look, he's holding it up already. He's pretty excited about it. But before we go there, I want to remind you, go over and take the Promote, Profit, Publish quiz at www.promoteprofitpublishquiz.com. Find out if you are really ready to get that book out to the world. There's a lot that needs to be done. And I know a lot of you think writing is the hard part. Well, guess what? Publishing and marketing is really, really the hard part. Also, don't forget to go over to our YouTube channel, Super Brand Publishing. Go over and subscribe. Everybody, if you're listening on Apple or you're reading this on a blog, you will actually find the videos over there so you can see these interviews in person. So today's guest is Chase Cunningham. And Chase is a noted creator of the Zero Trust Extended Framework. He is a cybersecurity expert with decades of operational experience in the NSA, US Navy, FBI Cyber, and other government mission groups, and the co-author of the Sinja comic series, Cyber Warfare Truth, Tactics and Strategies, and the host of Dr. Zero Trust podcast on Spotify. Chase was previously a VP and principal analyst at the Forrester Research, director of threat intelligence for Armor, director of cyber and analytics for Decisive Analytics, and chief cryptological officer for the US Navy. I didn't say that right. Say that. What is that?
Cryptologic.
Cryptologic. Okay. Welcome, Chase. That is quite a tongue twister. I should have practiced that. I didn't realize it was going to be so difficult.
Yeah, I threw lots of acronyms at you. Sorry.
Yeah. No, the acronyms were easy. It was those big words. Typically I'm like a hick, so no words over five letters.
Right. Yeah.
For me. So I'm really excited about your new book because when we first talked, I think the first hack that affected people in the United States, the Colonial Pipeline, had just literally happened. So I was excited about the relevance of the book, and I was excited about a prophetic thing that you told me about. We're going to see this more and more. So
yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that and why this book is so relevant. What's going on in the world that this really hits?
Well, I mean, ransomware has now been dubbed by the current administration as a national security threat. If you're not familiar with ransomware, that's where someone takes your computer over and locks it up and then says, if you want your stuff back, you got to send me money. Funny enough, if you looked at the amount of money that ransomware operators made this year, it's actually the third largest economy on planet Earth. Yeah, it's crazy. And then on top of that, we've started to see these attacks on critical infrastructure. Funny enough for me, in the book, I wrote about an attack on a water plant, and I wrote about it, and maybe like 2 weeks later, it actually happened. And I told my wife it was one of those "I told you so" moments. And as a husband, you don't get those very often. So, I got to say, "Hey, told you so, like this really can happen." And sure enough, it did. So everything that I'm writing about in here is technically possible, technically accurate, and unfortunately, highly probable.
So interesting. And my father actually worked for waste treatment, and there were a lot of chemicals involved with that he often said, somebody got a hold of these, they killed quite a few people, the chlorine that's involved. So one of the things that really impressed me when I first talked to you is your main character in here is a female. So can you talk a little bit about that and why you chose her?
Yeah, well, number one, we have a labor shortage noted in the cybersecurity industry, and we need more people that aren't, from your typical background. Me, I'm actually the I guess you'd say standard, right? Ex-military guy that came out of the South and works in technology. We need people that aren't from that neck of the woods. We need people that aren't military. We need lots more women in the space. So I wanted to write a book from sort of my personal experiences with women in the military and show look, it's not just a bunch of dudes running around in here doing cyber things. Like, we have really, really powerful women, and we have really a really significant need for them. So I was trying to kind of champion that message and say, come on, come do awesome things with us in this space.
Mhm. And ladies, talk about the STEM for, mothers that are listening, or, we probably don't have a younger crowd, but just the importance of the STEM being pushed in schools.
Yeah, I mean, everything now is technology based, right? I mean, people forget that we have an entire generation of people coming into the workforce that have never known a day in their life without wireless. They don't know how it works, but they have never been a day in their life without wireless technology. So STEM is going to be increasingly important, and our kids, our families, our moms, everyone, we're all connected. We're all using the internet all the time. It's very important we understand that there is a darker side to this thing. And if you don't know what you're doing, just like in any other space, it can be dangerous.
Exactly, exactly. And that is so true about our kids. I remember telling my son about, I was always teacher's pet, and I love doing the machine that they do the stencils and the ink, and that's how we made copies before Xerox.
Right.
And I used to love this. Look at even you're like, really? Like, they always haven't had copy machines. But yeah, we had these machines where you would actually type the assignment or whatever it was, put it on a roller that had ink on it, and just go like this with it, around in circles, and it would make our copies. So imagine handouts in class. That's how teachers used to do them. Right. That's why they had all this child slave labor and teachers' pets to do their copying for them.
Yeah, I mean, my kids for COVID last year, this city issued them laptops, and the funny thing was, they sent them the laptops home, and me as a security guy, the first thing I did was look at them, and I was like, these are terrible. Like, this is woefully insecure, and they're giving it to my children. And I tried to tell the school district leadership about it, and they honestly blew me off. And that's part of the problem I'm trying to get in front of people is it's not enough to have kind of this just sort of laissez-faire approach to things and go, well, I don't know about it, so it can't be a problem. We need to know, and we need to understand, and we need to be prepared.
Yeah, well, that goes back to too, I think when my kids came home and all of a sudden they had Gmail accounts and they were submitting things through Google Docs, I kind of had a fit about that, because I'm like, oh my gosh, Google is literally profiling you at this time.
You're the product. I remind people all the time now is that you have a tracking device with you 24/7. It's called your cell phone. And the cell phone company knows more about you than I ever did working at the NSA or FBI. And you are the product. That's what all these applications are doing, is they're making money off of your interactions. And unfortunately, you've consented to that.
Yeah, why I'm no longer on social media except for LinkedIn, for just that reason. I got tired of being the product on it.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that we talked about with your woman, your person that was the protagonist of this story, is that you feel that women, I love this too, are actually better at this cybersecurity because of their intuition. You want to expand on that?
Yeah, I've got two daughters. I grew up around a whole lot of women. All of them were really sort of strong, strong-minded, strong-willed, I guess you'd say. And what I've kind of learned being in the space for a long time is the guys are usually the harder ones to spin up, because men kind of just take things at face value, and we typically just look at it from the logic perspective, and if it doesn't logically fit, then it probably doesn't make sense. Whereas when you work with a woman, women's intuition's a real thing, and the fairer sex is better at kind of putting a puzzle together and coming out with an analytic leap, rather than just kind of going, well, this doesn't make sense because it doesn't fit into the mold. So I think you can't do better, honestly, than having a woman in cyber. And I think we need more of them.
Yeah. Listen to this, you guys. Isn't he a great husband? He's has so many nice things to say about us women. He's very well trained. Tell your wife, thank you.
I got daughters too. So yeah.
So you have tell us about some of the threats that you actually, because you said all of this is real. You sent me the most incredibly scary video from Lockheed Martin. I shared it with all of my friends that, I don't think people realize. I want you to share some of these scenarios, like the water you already did, but also that we are relying on a lot of people to be very ethical with this. Yeah. And in fact, entire countries that really aren't.
I mean that we are engaged in the Cold War 2.0, whether you realize it or not. I mean the Cold War just went digital. It didn't actually go away. It just changed into a digital space. So we're engaged in that, and we are at it. And there are no adversaries and there are no allies. We are going at our friends just like they're going at us, and we are constantly teetering on that razor's edge of if someone screws up, something really, really bad could happen really, really quickly. I mean, and I'm literally including nuclear sort of capabilities, which should scare the heck out of people. And I'm not doing this for the sake of, fantasy. Like, this is a reality. I lived and breathed this. And the other thing that we need to remember too is, like you said, we have this idea that in the combat space, if I pick up a gun, I have to look at someone, I have to squeeze the trigger, and I have to engage the target, right? And then hopefully I hit what I'm aiming at. In the digital space, if I keystroke something and I'm just not paying attention, I could inadvertently cause cataclysmic outcomes. And there are no safeties in cyberspace. Like, that's part of the problem. And it should be something that folks aren't necessarily scared of, but they should dang sure be aware of it, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And so I'm going to call them micro drones. The video you actually sent me.
Slaughter bots.
They're called slaughter bots. Okay.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that, because what struck me about that, not only that it was super scary, but that we're really relying on everybody being a good citizen in a scary world.
Yeah, well, if you can imagine, you can take artificial intelligence, you could take facial recognition, you could take drone technology, and you could put a little 9mm warhead on that thing, and you could go off and tell it via program, hey, Slaughterbot, go off and put that 9mm shell through this person's skull. And that's what they show in the video, is that this is technically possible. Yeah. And that's scary, because then you start thinking about, well, who's sitting behind the keyboard here making the decision on who gets the shell through the forehead. And it gets out of control really, really quickly. And I wrote about some drone scenarios in my book, because there's a drone. I hate flying, and there's a drone scenario that scares the hell out of me. And I had to write about it because I needed to get it out. Like, it was cathartic, but it's a very, very real scenario. And it is something that should be concerning as well.
Yeah, I actually remember reading a fiction novel several years ago where these drones, we're expecting this big drone up in the sky, like we see somebody out in a field, that they actually talked about the micro, like it can look like a bee, it can look like a bird, it can look like you have no idea who's surveilling you, or, if that thing up there is real. So, yeah. So another thing in the book is you talk about AI. And I think for most of us, we don't truly understand artificial intelligence. And in your book, it actually runs amok. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's, when you're saying this stuff is real, all of that's pretty scary.
Yeah, I mean, I think Elon Musk said, I think he's quoted as saying, we don't want AI. And I guess I would follow him up and say, we don't want AI either. Like, that's actually not something that would be beneficial to mankind in the long run. And I don't mean in the James Cameron sort of Terminator side of things, but I do think people should understand right now what we have in the market is actually what you would consider to be machine learning, which is basically really powerful algorithms with a lot of process and compute that come out with a beneficial outcome. So nothing crazy amazing there. It happens if you go on Facebook and you say, man, I really love my new sneakers. And then over on eBay, you get an email for new sneakers. Like, that's kind of ML, right? That's what makes that happen. Whereas AI is, you have really good math, really good process and compute, and you apply it with enough horsepower that the machine starts making its own decisions. And it's not aware, it's not HAL from that, Space 2000, the Kubrick movie or whatever, but it is a decision-making engine that's kind of deciding for itself. And just like you have with anything in life, kids, and when something that is aware starts making its own decisions, you may not like the decisions it makes.
Right? Like when you drop a certain word in your house and suddenly it's being parroted back to you.
Yeah, right. Or, you tell your child, like, don't do that, and they just do it anyway, just out of spite. Like, that's the kind of thing we're talking about here. And
that is sort of what Gabriel's about, is something that was developed and then you thought it was dead and it came back and
Yeah,
and
and
haunted
Gabriel,
everybody.
it was developed by the government. They did it as a research project, which is what actually happens a lot of times. And they said, this is a bad idea, let's shelve it. And they didn't do it the right way. And then Gabriel is able to kind of get out. And that's when things go really bad.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny, the operative word there too sort of was math. I remember reading Weapons of Math Destruction and just being blown away because people don't realize that, and there's a lot out there about math is racist or whatever it is, but math is in every single thing we do on the planet. The chair you sit in, the car you drive, the house you live in. So how does that all get, like, talk about the strong math and how that all fits in?
Yeah, so in this particular instance, basically, the idea that the government had was, can we run really powerful algorithms and say, hey, let's see if this thing looks at a certain type of content and then uses math to make its own inferences about what it thinks about the content. And it's doing that based on an algorithm, based on a formula. And that works fine for a little while. But what you realize is if you give something different data that it doesn't necessarily know about, it really might start chewing on it and coming out with decisions that don't make, and it's all based on the mathematics. And the better the math is, the better the outcome will be. But in this case, speed, it can actually be the enemy. You don't want this thing making decisions really quickly because it'll beat humans to the punch.
Right. Right. That's very, very scary. So first cyber thriller for you. But you have written some other books, and I know we're going to tell people where to get Gabriel at the end, but talk about the other books because you have a strong interest in getting children involved in this early.
Yeah, so I've written and co-authored 3 comic books for kids and families on cybersecurity. It's Sinja series. It's in 4 languages, and it's been kind of cool that every once in a while I get an email from some kid overseas that says I had a Sinja birthday, and it's just to get them to understand it's kind of the cooler sides of what is going on in the space without it being, telling them from a computer scientist perspective, like it's a comic book. Who doesn't want to read comics?
Right. And who wants to listen to a computer scientist?
Exactly.
Especially, like, I don't have the engineer brain. I remember being at an event, an entrepreneurial event, and a mechanical engineer was explaining his product to me. And I was like, oh my God, where's the coffee? I'm going to fall asleep. Like, I don't get math as a creative person. I have never been super good at math. So where do we find Gabriel and where do we find you? You have a podcast. Where can we find that podcast at?
It's on all the popular forums. It's on iTunes. It's on Google Podcast. It's on Spotify. It's Dr. Zero Trust, one word. That's me. And then you can also look up the book on Amazon. It'll be out there on the 5th of October. And if you're looking for me, I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn and Twitter. I'm actually the only Chase Cunningham with a comic book avatar. So
very easy to find. Also, too, I want to mention there was a press release done about the book. It actually just released today when we are recording and been picked up by Associated Press, Market Watch, and several other outlets. So this is going to be good. A lot of people are going to know about it.
That's the hope. For me, this is really about awareness and about letting folks know that, like, there is a darker side to technology and making sure that it's also grounded in reality. So if I have one person read it and kind of ping me and say, like, wow, you woke me up to this whole other side of the equation, then I call that a win.
That is so cool. You guys, I had to read the book, of course, since we published it, but it's a super easy read. It's a good cyber thriller, and I really encourage you to go over and check it out. Over on Amazon, Gabriel, I believe it's in pre-sale already. Well, actually, by the time this records, it will be out in Kindle and in softcover. You want to hold that cover up again?
Yep, right here. I've got the only one in existence right now. So.
That's right, you do, don't you?
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much for being on today. And thanks for bringing awareness to the big problems.
Hey, thank you for everything. And thanks for helping my book not be terrible.
Well, yeah, you're welcome.